Hello, fellow food lovers. Today I will be making tiramisu cake roll. You will need one cake box mix, white, ingredients to make the box cake. For the filling, you're going to need 16 ounces of mascarpone cheese, 6 egg yolks, 2/3 of a cup of white sugar, and half a liter of whipping cream, as well as 1 cup of espresso or just plain coffee and cocoa powder. Okay, so I got the box cake mix here. So for this box mix, you need 3 whole eggs, 1/3 cup of cooking oil, and 1 1/4 cup of water. But just follow the directions on your cake mix because it could be different. Yeah, so 3 eggs went in there, and 1/3 cup of oil, and 1 1/4 cup of water. So I give it a whisk. You don't have to whisk it that long, and you don't need to use a machine. You could use a machine hand mixer if you like, or a KitchenAid stand mixer or whatever. But I find it works just as well using a hand whisk. And you only have to mix until the dry ingredients are mixed into the wet ingredients. So it might even take 3 or 4 minutes of that to mix up the batter. So it should look like a batter, and there shouldn't be big clumps of dried stuff in there. It should be well incorporated. Okay, so I got a cookie tray here. I'm going to use that to make the cake roll. So I'm going to get parchment paper rolled out, about a little bit bigger than the cookie tray. So what I do is I'll usually use a non-stick aerosol spray, and I'll spray down the cookie tray. This is a non-stick cookie tray, but I'm gonna spray non-stick aerosol on there along the bottom and the sides of the tray, and that would actually help the parchment paper stay in place. The parchment paper will actually stick to that non-stick oil, and help keep it in place. So you want to fold down the corners so that when you pour the batter in, it'll kind of fit the shape of the tray nicely. Okay, I didn't spray non-stick on the parchment paper, but if you want, you can, and it might be easier to roll the cake if you put non-stick on the parchment paper. I didn't, but you can do that. You can do that if you like. So you're not going to use the entire cake mix batter. You might use probably 2/3 of it. If you use the whole thing, the cake roll will be too thick. You want kind of a thin roll so it'll roll easier. Yeah, so probably about 2/3 of the batter, and the rest of the batter I baked off in a round cake tin, just for something else. Okay, so I used the whisk to kind of smooth it out so it's flat and evenly distributed over the the cookie pan. So I have the oven preheated to about 350 degrees Celsius. It's set on bake so that the bottom element's on. So I'm gonna cook it for probably 15 minutes, but I'm gonna check every 5 minutes to make sure it doesn't burn. So it's on the top rack, and it's set at 350 degrees Celsius, and the bottom element's on set to bake. Okay, so I got the Italian cream cheese, the mascarpone cheese, It's about 16 ounces worth. So I'm going to put it into a mixing bowl. Yeah, so the cake should take about 15 minutes to bake, but you can check. When you take it out, if you stick a toothpick into the thickest part of the cake and it comes out clean without any batter sticking to it, then it's done. But I predict about 15 minutes. Okay, so the mascarpone cheese, you should have it at room temperature before you use it so it's nice and soft. But when you put it in a bowl, I took a whisk and I mixed it so it's all kind of softened up a bit so it's more pliable. Okay, so I'm going to make the egg yolk sugar mixture to fold into the mascarpone cheese. So this is a cooked egg yolk and sugar mixture. So I'm going to put it on a double boiler to cook the egg yolks. So you're going to need 6 egg yolks. So I separate them and I put the egg whites in a separate bowl. I'm going to use that for something else like a egg white omelet or something. So you just need 6 egg yolks. In the meantime, I have a pot on the stove on high heat that's half filled with water. And the pot is just big enough that you can set the mixing bowl on top of it. And the bottom part of the mixing bowl is sitting in the pot. So that's on the stove right now, and I'm bringing it to a boil. So the egg yolks, they pretty much need to be cooked before you fold them into the mascarpone cheese. Yeah, and don't use the egg whites, it won't work. It has to be just egg yolks. So I'm going to measure out 2/3 of a cup of sugar. So this is the only sugar you're going to be using in this a tiramisu cake cream filling. So I'm going to pour the sugar in with the egg yolks, and then I'm going to set the mixing bowl on top of the pot of boiling water, and it's going to help cook the egg yolks and the sugar. So as soon as you put it on the pot that's a boiling water, it's still on high heat and the water's boiling. You can take a whisk and you're going to start mixing the sugar into the egg yolks. And you want to make sure that you scrape the bottom of the mixing bowl with a whisk so that none of the egg yolk that's right up against the bowl is going to cook. You don't want it to become scrambled eggs. You don't want like little bits of cooked egg in the mixture. It has to be pretty creamy looking. Yeah, so I'll be mixing that for maybe 4 or 5 minutes now. So you want to gently mix it to keep it from forming into like scrambled egg, but you want to cook it as well. Okay, so I'm going to check on the cake. It's been 15 minutes in the oven. So I'm going to take it out. Okay, I'm going to make the coffee for the tiramisu. So you can use espresso if you have an espresso maker. I'm just going to use instant coffee. It's faster. So I'm going to put a tablespoon of instant coffee into a cup. I'm going to add some boiling water to that. So the egg yolk sugar mixture is cooked. It changed color actually. It's become a lighter color. And it looks a little frothy, so you know that it's cooked. So it's been on a double boiler for about 5 minutes. So I'm letting it cool now. You need the egg yolk mixture to be cool before you put it into the mascarpone cheese. And so I set the cup of coffee aside. You need it to be cool as well. And when I took the cake out of the oven, I stuck a toothpick in it and it came out clean. So the cake is done. When it's cooked in a cookie tray in a very thin sheet, it'll cook quite quickly. So for depending on the temperature of your oven, it could even cook in 10 minutes. Just check it every 5 minutes. Make sure it doesn't burn. And if you're not sure if it's cooked or not, stick a toothpick in it. Okay, so I added the cooked egg yolk sugar mixture into the mascarpone cheese. So that was 6 egg yolks and a 2/3 cup of sugar. So I'm folding it in with a spatula now. You know, fold in so everything's evenly mixed in. So when this cools in the fridge, it'll become more solid. It's still kind of liquid, so. Okay, I'll just set that aside. You can also put in the fridge to cool it down. So I'm gonna whip the whipped cream. So that's half a liter, 500 milliliters of whipping cream. I'm pouring it into the KitchenAid stand mixer. I'm gonna whip it. And you don't need to add any sugar to this. So I have it turned up to high. Usually when you're using a KitchenAid mixer, if you're making whipped cream, you need to set it on the high setting. And it'll whip quite quickly, maybe 5 minutes. But keep an eye on it. If you over whip it, it'll become butter and it won't be very tasty. Yeah, so I'm not adding any sugar into the whipped cream because when you fold it into the mascarpone cheese, the egg yolk, and the sugar, it's going to be sweetened then. Okay, as you can see, it's stiffening up. When you start to see it looking stiff in the mixing bowl, then it's pretty much done. So I'm going to turn it off now. And that's what it looks like. It's stuck to the whisk. Okay, so I'm going to transfer the whipping cream into the mascarpone cheese, egg yolk, and sugar mixture. I'm going to fold it in. So it's going to give the cream mixture a nice airiness. So I'm using a spatula to fold the mixture together. Okay, so I'm gonna take the cake out of the cookie tray. So you need to cut the edges. The edges are kind of crispy and hard. So if you leave the edges on, it's gonna be a problem when you're rolling the cake. It'll cause the cake to break probably. So I'm gonna cut off all 4 edges. So what's left behind is kind of soft and kind of rollable for sure. And yeah, and if I'd sprayed non-stick on top of the parchment paper, it'd probably be a lot easier to kind of remove it. Okay, so here's the coffee. It's cooled down. I'm gonna use a brush. I'm gonna dab the coffee over top of the entire surface of the cake. Okay, so here's the mascarpone cheese mixture. I'm gonna spread it evenly over top of the cake. So probably you're gonna have some cream mixture left over. So if you bake off the rest of the batter in a round cake tin, you can use that to make another tiramisu as well. Or you can just eat it straight out of the bowl. I think some Italian restaurants will serve tiramisu in a bowl, like pudding. Okay, so besides the coffee, another traditional aspect of tiramisu is cocoa powder. So I'm gonna put cocoa powder into a sieve and kind of sprinkle it over top of the cream mixture. So this is why you need parchment paper to make a cake roll. Using a parchment paper will help you roll the cake easier. So you pick up the cake by the parchment paper and you start to turn it and kind of roll the cake in on itself. So rolling the cake with parchment paper will be an easier way to make it without causing the cake to break. And yeah, you need to have the cake cool down completely before you put the cream mixture on. Otherwise, the cream mixture will kind of melt. And you don't want that. Okay, there you have it. That's a tiramisu cake roll. The bottom of the cake has a pretty nice design on it from the baking process. So since it's a long cake roll, I'm going to cut it in half. So each half will fit onto a plate. So you want to shape it with your fingers so it's nice and round. So there you have it. That's tiramisu cake roll. I know traditional tiramisu uses ladyfingers, but you can definitely make this with a cake. Okay, happy baking!